Welcome to Mindful with Minaa, where we explore how mindfulness can enhance your relationships and well-being. I'm your host, Minaa B, a licensed social worker, mental health educator, and author. Through insightful discussions, I will guide you towards self-awareness and self-efficacy, empowering you to effectively manage your relationships, reduce burnout, and be more present with yourself. So let's jump into today's episode. What's up, mindful community? Welcome back to another episode of Mindful with Minaa. And this is an important episode because today is election day. And it felt really heavy on my heart to do this episode because I imagine that this election, just like the last few elections we had to go through, were very heavy and emotionally difficult and draining and exhausting for people. So it's election day, and I figured why not put this episode out so that we can all find ways to regulate our nervous system. This episode is not about who you should be voting for or diving into the nitty-gritty of politics. That is not the goal for today's episode. It's really all about coping. It's really all about learning to manage the stress and anxiety that comes with things that are outside of your control. Because whether you vote or not, we don't know what the final outcome will be. So you might be listening to this episode before you vote, or you might be listening to this episode after you vote, or even after we find out what the results are. Regardless, the goal here is to embrace just simply being in the present and learning how to navigate your stress. Elections bring up a lot of emotions, no matter how you're feeling. So this episode is designed to help you process what's happening today and give you some tips on how you can take care of your mental health. Election day can feel like the culmination of weeks, even months of stress. And while it's important to engage in the process, it's also crucial to protect your well-being in the face of all of this tension. And our nervous systems are wired to react to stressful events like election day with anxiety, especially when it feels like so much is outside of our control. I decided to dive into some research, and I saw that according to the American Psychological Association, election stress is a real and growing issue. A study found that 68% of Americans report feeling significant stress around elections, with election day itself being a major trigger. It can feel like everything is on the line, and this heightened stress can lead to symptoms like tension, irritability, difficulty sleeping, and even physical discomfort. So how do we navigate this? Well, first things first. You do not have to be glued to your TV or phone all day. This is a time where you might need to disconnect as much as you can if you know you are prone to going into an anxious spiral. Because it's tempting to follow every single update, but doing so can overwhelm your nervous system. So based off past elections, if you notice that you tend to become really stressed out and you're constantly checking the news and you're constantly logging into CNN or just whatever news outlets you follow, this is a time where you need to give yourself permission to take breaks. Step away, breathe, and engage in the activities around you that ground you. So maybe today is a day where you need to go on frequent walks. Maybe you need to turn on a playlist and listen to some music. Or maybe you need to co-regulate with others by spending time with loved ones. Remember, no matter the results, you can't control the outcome, but you can control how you respond. Now, one of the hardest parts of election day and election seasons in general can be the tension that arises when people you care about are voting differently from you. It is extremely difficult to realize that someone you're close to supports a candidate or cause that feels completely at odds with your values. This can bring up feelings of grief and disappointment. Grief because the person you thought you knew may hold beliefs that are difficult for you to accept, and disappointment because political divisions can feel personal. They challenge our sense of connection and common ground. Another thing that happens is anger. Honestly, you can start to feel angry. You can also sometimes feel this sense of intellectual loneliness because you start to realize, wow, like this is really how you think. This is really how you feel. These are the things that you're supporting. And you start to realize you are functioning either in a family system, because sometimes the people that disappoint us regarding how they vote can be our family members. It can also be our friends. And you start to realize you're existing in either a family system or a friendship circle where people have different views from you. And you might feel, based off the views that they have, they're highlighting their ignorance. And that can be really, really hard to grapple with when somebody is justifying certain things, that you can read through that and realize there is a level of ignorance that this person holds that they're blind to. Often, too, sometimes people are voting not because of their own value systems, not because they engaged in their own level of critical thinking. Sometimes people will simply vote because they listened to a podcast, or they heard this person preach about something on a Sunday, or they heard all of these different conversations, and now it's influencing how they think. So you start to realize too, wow, this person doesn't really have a mind of their own. They're not engaging in their own critical thinking. They're not really approaching this subject matter with the sense of really viewing and understanding all of the different angles here, and how voting maybe for this person can impact society at large, but also us as individuals, not just collective disruption, but individual disruption as well. And so you realize that this person just hasn't done that work yet. They feed off of things that other people are saying to them without really doing their due diligence to recognize or acknowledge who they want to vote for and why. And so that can be really disappointing and lead to a feeling of frustration. And the most that I can say is that when it comes to managing these relationships, the first step is to acknowledge your feelings. It's okay to be upset. It's also okay to feel hurt. But once you've acknowledged that, the next step is to decide how you want to move forward. Not every disagreement has to lead to a falling out, but for some people, these political differences may cross a boundary that's too important to ignore. And so if you find yourself in this situation, here are a few things to consider. First, you need to decide what your boundaries are. You don't have to engage in political debates all day. If they feel harmful to your well being, if they are causing you stress, it is okay to decide that there are certain conversations that you are not going to entertain because it's causing more harm than good. It's okay to say, I'm not comfortable discussing this anymore. You also have to use discernment in these conversations to recognize who you're talking to, because sometimes we're having conversations with people who their words are not directly coming from their own research or their own personal values or beliefs or ideologies. Their words are simply coming from the influences that they have around them, and they're just regurgitating that information back to you. So sometimes you have to ask yourself, why am I having a conversation with somebody who hasn't even done their own learning? All you're doing here is talking to me about things you heard someone else say, and because of what they said, it influenced how you approached a particular situation without you really doing the work yourself to even ask yourself, why am I listening to this person? Why am I putting their opinions or ideologies on a pedestal? So just be mindful of the nature of the conversation and use discernment to know when it's time to take a step back to preserve and protect your peace. The next thing that you want to do is assess the impact on your relationship. Ask yourself, is this political disagreement something that we can work through? Can I separate their vote from our relationship? For some, the answer may be yes, and unfortunately for others, you might realize the answer is no. And if it's no, then you have to do what you need to do to take care of your mental health. This might be a season where you are going to lose some friendships. This might be a season where you're going to take a step back from certain family members, and you also might take a step back from certain friends. Remember, everything doesn't have to be, I'm going to cut you off completely and remove you from my life. But there can be some circumstances where you decide, you know what, I'm just going to take a step back from this relationship because you're revealing a lot of things to me for the very first time that I was not aware of. And you hold certain ideologies that I believe are harmful. And it makes me uncomfortable to exist in this relationship with you. And this is where the grief process comes in, like this is the part of that work where you have to recognize we all don't think the same and we don't have to think the same. And so if you exist in a circle of friendships or even in your family system with people who think differently from you, then you have to ask yourself, can I separate the vote from the relationship? Can I separate their ideologies from the relationship? Can I coexist with them while knowing that this is something that they believe, but they offer so many other valuable things in this relationship that I still want to hold on to it? But if they don't, or if whatever it is that they believe in is just too significant for you, then this is just going to have to be a time in your life where you process the grief of that. The third thing I want you to remember is that sometimes you need to take a break. Sometimes a little distance can help. If the stress of a political disagreement is too much, taking a step back from the relationship, at least temporarily, can give you space to process and reflect on how you want to move forward. The last thing I want to share is the importance of focusing on shared values. If you do decide to stay in the relationship, try focusing on the things that you and the person do have in common, because political differences don't have to erase the shared experiences and values you hold. You also might want to consider investigating why this person believes what they believe. What influenced these ideologies, and how do they believe these ideologies are going to help society progress forward? Sometimes it's important to just be curious about the way people think and what's influencing that thinking, and ask yourself, can I tolerate this? Can I tolerate that this person still has more learning to do? Can I tolerate that this person may have been influenced by maybe certain things that I just don't agree with? Can I tolerate that this person is conflicted about the things that they feel based off their own values and upbringing, and again, influences, because influence is big here. And so you also have to ask yourself, can I learn to be curious about why they believe in the things they believe, but also, can I work with this? Can I sit through this? Now, let's talk about what happens if the election doesn't go the way you hoped, because this can bring up intense feelings of disappointment, frustration, and even grief. So, what can you do to cope with these feelings? First, give yourself permission to feel. That's always the number one thing I talk about. We cannot practice self-regulation without honoring what we feel. So allow yourself the space to grieve if the results don't align with your hopes. It's okay to be sad, frustrated. It's also okay to be fearful. It's okay to be concerned, because at the end of the day, we do understand that the election can shape our future. So it's okay to exist in that fear and honor that that fear is real, but do your best not to allow that fear to control your life. The next thing you want to do is lean on your support system. This is a time to talk to friends, family, or even a therapist or your coach. This is a time to engage in healthy venting, where you call a friend up and you're like, I cannot believe that these are the results, and you complain about it. Sometimes we need to complain as a way to just relieve the stress that we're feeling and know that you're in the thick of this with someone else, because there are going to be plenty of people who are probably experiencing what you're experiencing after the results are in. And so this is a time where you can just co-regulate with others who are probably exhibiting the same fears and frustrations that you have, and you are working together to figure out how you can cope and calm each other's nervous systems down. The next thing is engage in self-care. This is definitely a time where you want to prioritize your well-being, because you don't want to have your nervous system spiraling and putting you in a state of hyperarousal or hypoarousal, which is something, if you listen to my podcast regularly, I talk about a lot. Hyperarousal is when our body is in fight or flight mode, so we're constantly in a state of panic and anxiety, where hypoarousal is when the body is frozen and so it's shut down and we're experiencing high levels of burnout or fatigue or dissociation, all of those things. And so you want to bring your body to its window of tolerance. Again, there is so much here at stake. There is so much that we cannot control, but you can control your nervous system. That is not up to the government. So you need to figure out what are the things that you can do to bring yourself back to your equilibrium and bring yourself back to your window of tolerance. Because let me tell you, regardless of what's going on in society, your mental health still matters. And remember that you play a big role in taking care of your mental health, regardless of what's happening in society. The last thing I want to share is remember the long game. No single election defines everything. If the results aren't what you wanted, remind yourself that change is a marathon, not a sprint. Keep engaging in ways that matter to you, whether that's through advocacy, community involvement, mental health healing, or supporting causes you believe in. Don't let today determine how the rest of your life is going to unfold. There are so many ways that you can continue to fight for the change that you believe in and fight for the things that you want in life. So, as I wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you with this. No matter what happens today, your mental health and well-being are worth protecting. Elections are important, but they don't define your entire world. Whether your candidate wins or loses, whether you're grieving relationships or managing political tension, you have the power to choose how you show up for yourself in the aftermath. So take today moment by moment. Protect your peace, set your boundaries, and remember that you are not alone in navigating the emotional weight of this day. Self-care isn't just something we do in our spare time, it's a necessity for getting through tough days like today. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this conversation has given you some tools to manage the stress and anxiety of this day. As usual, if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and make sure to subscribe. Please also share this episode with someone you know who might need to hear today's message. And lastly, head to my website, MinaaB.com, so that you can sign up for my newsletter and order a copy of my book, Owning Our Struggles. Take care of yourself today, and remember to treat this day as a mental health day the way you would with any other day that is provoking feelings of stress and anxiety. Until next time, y'all.